రికార్డ్ అవుతాం. డబ్ల్యూగేట్ చేస్తున్నాం. ఇది కూడా వస్తుంది పాత, ఇది అంతే జావా పాత. డౌన్లోడ్ అయింది కదా ఇప్పుడు, ఇంత ఇన్స్టాల్ మాత్రం ఓపీటీలో చేస్తాం. ఇక్కడికి వచ్చి కాపీ చేసి ఏంటంటే ఓపీటీకి మూవ్ చేసి ఏంటిది దీన్ని అన్జిప్ చేసి అన్జిప్ ఎక్స్ట్రాక్ట్. ఇక్కడ ఏంటిది మనకి ఫైల్ టార్ జీజెడ్ కదా, అంటే ఎక్స్ట్రాక్ట్ చేయాలి, ఫస్ట్ అన్జిప్ చేయాలి, తర్వాత ఎక్స్ట్రాక్ట్ చేయాలి. ఇక్కడ అన్జిప్ ఎక్స్ట్రాక్ట్ చేసి ఓపీటీకి మూవ్ చేస్తాం. అంటే ఓపీటీలో ఇన్స్టాల్ అవుతుంది, ఓపీటీలో అవుతుంది అదంతా. ఓపీటీలో టౌన్ కట్ అనే ఫోల్డర్ క్రియేట్ చేస్తాం. దానికి మూవ్ రీనేమ్ చేస్తాం. లైక్ టౌన్ కట్ ఇది ఎందుకు నాకు కూడా ఐడియా లేదు. చేంజ్ డైరెక్ట్ దానికి మూవ్ అయ్యి దాంట్లో ఒక అంటే ఇక్కడ ఎందుకు క్రియేట్ చేసి అనేది ఐడియా లేదు నాకు అసలు. టౌన్ కార్డ్ డేట్ సర్వీస్ అని క్రియేట్ చేసి దాన్ని ఓపెన్ చేస్తాను. ఏదన్నా ఒక కమాండ్ నాయనతో నన్ను వాడుకోవచ్చు. ఇక్కడికి వచ్చి ఇదంతా కాపీ చేసి యూనిట్ దగ్గర నుంచి ఇదంతా కంట్రోల్ ఎంటర్ కంట్రోల్ బయటికి రావాలంటే సేవ్ అండి. ఇది ఏంటంటే రీలోడ్ చేస్తున్నాం మనం. ఫస్ట్ రీలోడ్ చేసి ఇప్పుడు డౌన్లోడ్ అయింది, డౌన్లోడ్ అయింది. టామ్ క్యాట్ని రీలోడ్ చేసి టామ్ క్యాట్ని ఎనేబుల్ చేస్తున్నాము. క్లారిటీ లేదు ఏంటంటే అక్కడ ఉన్న స్టెప్ ఫాలో అయినా. ఇప్పుడు టామ్ క్యాట్ స్టేటస్ చూద్దాం. ఇన్యాక్టివ్ స్టేట్ లో ఉంటుంది మనం, ఎందుకంటే స్టార్ట్ చేయాలి కాబట్టి. ఇప్పుడు అది కూడా కమాండ్ సిస్టమ్ సిటీ టామ్ క్యాట్ ఇక్కడ ఉంటుంది. యాక్టివ్ అంటే ఇన్యాక్టివ్ స్టేట్ లో ఉంది, డెడ్ లో ఉంది. ఇక్కడ వచ్చి క్యూ కొడితే ఎగ్జిట్ అవుతాం. ఎగ్జిట్ అయినా మళ్ళీ టామ్ క్యాట్ ని స్టార్ట్ యాక్టివ్ ఎక్సైటెడ్ స్టేట్ లో ఉంది కదా. ఇక్కడ ఈ కమాండ్స్ అన్నీ అంతే. నెక్స్ట్ టామ్ క్యాట్ ని స్టాప్ చేస్తాడు, మళ్ళీ స్టేటస్ చూస్తాడు, డెడ్ అని వస్తుంది, మళ్ళీ రీస్టార్ట్ చేస్తాడు, మళ్ళీ టామ్ క్యాట్ స్టేటస్ ఇస్తుంది, మళ్ళీ యాక్టివ్ అని వస్తుంది. అంతే ఈ కమాండ్స్.
this Apache Tomcat and Nginx? Yes. Tasks completed. How many finished tasks? Sorry. How many finished? Going on is not really yet. How many finished out of them? Can't really hear you. Apache Tomcat you finished. Nginx? You started it now. How long will it take? 1 hour? Goodbye.
Yeah, task wise completed. So Tomcat 5 tasks completed and day 2 and the engine service.
Apache completed. What about you?
All 3 done. 3 days. Apache Tomcat is
Second task I'm doing.
Second task is
I'm doing now.
Tomcat.
Apache.
You finished anything else?
Tomcat I finished.
Tomcat you finished? Yes. Nginx is pending.
Doing first task.
Which one?
First task.
Tomcat.
Tomcat.
You finished Apache.
No, sir.
You
First
finished
task.
Nginx.
Yeah.
You finished Nginx.
No, sir. First task I am doing first task.
You're doing first task in Apache.
Yeah, but
Did you finish anything else?
no, nothing.
Why not? It's been 3 days.
Practice.
Sorry?
Don't know how to do like that.
You don't know how to do.
Yeah.
That's just a copy paste thing, isn't it?
I asked him.
You don't have to ask anything. The document is extremely clear. If you do a copy paste, it will still work.
Yeah. I will do it. By
You
1 hour.
haven't tried it, and you are blaming it on I don't understand. You're indirectly telling you're stupid, are you? And why do you accept that you are stupid? Because that document I know, just copy paste. People who have finished, you think they understood everything? They didn't.
I'm asking why we want to do like that. I'm asking.
Why are you asking others? Why are you not asking me? You are getting time from him?
No.
And why are you not asking your trainer? You should ask me.
Okay.
I'm the one who is training.
Okay.
You're going to pay me the money. And what you said, I think, is an excuse. I don't think you really asked anybody. I don't believe that statement. What about you?
2 tasks.
Which one?
Task one for installation and second one
Which product? Apache.
first Tomcat.
Tomcat. Apache Tomcat. Did you finish Apache HTTP?
The installation I finished. After that we can go into the that part.
So you have finished halfway through it and then you jumped on to something else?
No sir. First I finished the video, after that installation and going to all of this.
Isn't it almost 2 days or 3 days you've been doing it?
No sir.
How many days did you spend on that thing?
1 day. 1 day.
13th. When did we start it? The video part? 13th we started? You finished it on 13th and 14th.
14.
On the holiday day. You didn't do anything. You are enjoying the festival. Did you enjoy the festival? It's okay. Did you enjoy the festival? I guess. You did?
No.
You didn't. And what are you doing? You're neither enjoying nor working. Sleeping. Is your age to sleep, really? What about you? How long you finished?
I completed Tomcat and going on Apache. Tomcat completed sir, Apache.
Okay. Ideally, you should have completed at least one technology. You should be on the second one, and if you have finished second and third also, it's extremely good, which means you're learning hard. Alright, so let's see what these Tomcat and these Nginx and these Apache servers are, so that we get the general idea. So we're talking about HTTPD server, then you have a Tomcat server, then Nginx server. Those are three things that you are trying to understand. But to understand these servers, you have to understand the general structure of a web. Let's say you do a www.google.com on your laptop in a browser. This is what you do, right?
Yes.
So you have your laptop, a Windows 10 laptop, you open a Chrome browser on it, and you hit a website. Now what happens here is, when you hit the website, what do you get? The page. Basically, it's called an index page, index.html page. These are all HTML pages. So you have the Google bar, isn't it? The search bar. Now this whole thing is designed in HTML. It also have other programming languages like JavaScript. It will also have cascading style sheets. The CSS basically gives it a structure, nice structure. The HTML page basically tells you whether it's a table or a simple tag, those things. So don't worry about internals of how to create these pages. That is for developers. All developers usually start with HTML. They go into CSS. Nowadays they are going into JavaScript. Then they usually go into either Java, .NET, or Node. One of these three verticals, the more. That's for programmers. You don't have to really worry. What you have to know is when a page loads here, how exactly is your browser getting that fix? That's what you are interested in. So when you hit this page, your laptop or your browser basically sends a request to google.com server. But the browsers do not really know what's the IP of google.com. And computers cannot really understand these names. Computers can understand only IPs. Like human beings have names, computers have IPs. What's the command to get the IP of anything? What's the command to get the IP address? Right? So here, this laptop has to know this IP that it needs to communicate. So it has to know what is the IP that corresponds to google.com. Now to get that data, your laptop sends a request to something called a DNS. DNS is domain naming service. It basically has a mapping. It has a map. If somebody comes with a google.com, send them to some address. This address is Google server address. So somewhere in Mumbai, inside the data center, there is a server. On that server, there is an IP 10.10.10.10. So they have updated the world DNS records. These are called zones. Across the world, there are about 10 to 12 zones. They are basically servers with listings, like telephone numbers. That's simple stuff. Now all that they have is the name of the website, the IP. So say if you have your own website, abc.com, you can update the DNS records with some IP that you have purchased. An IP, static IP, usually costs $5 per month. If you update it, the world, across the world, it gets updated in 10 DNS servers. It usually takes about 5 to 10 hours. Nowadays, it's much faster. It updates in 1 hour usually. Alright. So what we have here is a DNS that has mapping. So your laptop has sent the request. The DNS responds back with the IP. Now the browser again sends the same request now to IP. Because laptops know how to communicate with other IPs using the TCP/IP protocol. So once it sends, it lands here on the actual Google server. On the Google server, you have the page index.html. This page, somebody has to give this page back to this browser. which means you should have another process here which can take this page and give it back to the request. Now instead of an index page, if you ask for HTML, that page should be available here. If that page is not available, somebody should tell that it's not available. That's when you will see this page for page not found. That is all 400 series. It's called 4xx series. If you have 2xx series, this is all good. 3xx are redirects. 4xx are bad. 5xx are also bad. These are the 4 different error codes they are called. Are HTTP response codes. Alright? 3x is good, successful request. 3x are redirects. 4x are all page not found, permission denied errors, all those things. 5xx are internal server errors. Leave those things aside. You're interested in this and this. So what happened here is, you contacted the Google server. Somebody on that server check whether the page exists or not. If it exists, you get a response with some code in 2xx. If it doesn't exist, you get a response with some code in 4xx. Now this checking and responding has to be done by somebody. That somebody is usually called a web server. Because this is the technology that was initially starting when the website started, somewhere in 1990. At that time, these are called websites, and a server or a process that handles the website related thing used to be called web server. Also, when you are sending this request, you are sending it http://google.com. This is the HTTP protocol, hypertext transfer protocol. Alright, this HTTP is being handled by web server. Therefore, it's called a HTTP daemon, the HTTP server. Now, one such server initially created by a company or a foundation called Apache. That's why it's called Apache HTTP server. Now, the main thing that HTTP servers do is they serve HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and any images. These are the 4 types of content that they will serve. This content is called static content. So what's a web server? Something that serves static content. The reason it's called static content is the changes, means the content inside these pages does not change depending on the requester. Whoever requests these pages, they all appear same always. Now, as opposed to static content, if there is an opposite of static content, what would that be? A dynamic content. What would be the meaning of dynamic content? Changes. Right. Now, for something to change every time, you need to have a program that runs, which means you should have a programming language. Anything. So when you have a programming language associated with a request, the program gets executed and the output changes from request to another request. So in that case, what happens is, when a request is sent, you will get one response, I might get another response. Anything like, let's say you log into an ICICI bank website. You log into your account. When you check the balance, you would get a different response. I will get a different response. Because there is some Java code or .NET code, gets executed, goes to the database, fetches the balance, gives it to us. So when there is programming involved, you have dynamic content. Now such a programming code cannot be handled by a web server. All that the web server can do, these are very initial days. They were invented at the beginning of the internet. All that they can do is check if the page exists. If it does, send it to the requester. If it does not, send a corresponding 400 code. Later, because the programming languages started evolving, they needed some other server to handle that thing. So now you have another server which can handle dynamic. One such server is Tomcat server, also developed by Apache. So you have an Apache HTTPD server, Apache Tomcat server. This type of servers are called app servers. What was the first one? A web server. The second one is app server. What's the difference? Static content and dynamic content. Static content means HTML, CSS, images, JavaScript. Because the code does not change, it's always the same. Whereas dynamic content, any programming language is dynamic content. It could be Java, it could be .NET, C, C++, anything. If you have code that needs to be executed, then that's app server. So the most popular app server is Tomcat. Apart from this, there are other heavy servers, app server JBoss, WebLogic, WebSphere, Glassfish. These are all app servers, which means they can handle Java code. Out of all these things, the first one is most popular now because it's lightweight. Then Apache, like HTTPD server, Apache, there are a lot of other servers also, web servers. The most popular Apache server, most popular HTTPD server is Apache. The other one that is popular is Nginx. It's usually pronounced engine like this. Nginx. Alright? It's written with N. So engine, like bike engine, the same Nginx. Alright? This is also popular. So one of these two you will always come across, and the other one is Tomcat. That's what you will come across. Now when you are dealing with these things, you are basically talking about two processes. One is the browser, one process, other one is a web server, isn't it? The browser process is communicating with the web server process. The browser is on your laptop and the web server is on the remote server, isn't it? So you should write running notes quickly. This is not a movie. You won't get these things anywhere else. Alright, so you have a browser. And on the browser, you are sending a request, isn't it? This request travels to the server. So you have two processes talking to each other. What's the first process? A browser process. What's the other process? A web server process. The browser sends a request. What type of request it is? HTTP request. This also handles the same request, HTTP request. Now when two processes are communicating, you're sending google.com. And what's the DNS entry that says about google.com? IP. Once it reaches here, how does this system know which process should handle that request? Because this system will have a lot of other processes. How do you see all the processes in a system?
Yes.
If you see this command, you'll see a lot of processes. So how does this operating system know who should handle this request? That does not know anything at all. The sender has to tell about it. The way a sender tells is IP port number. So on this IP, there is a process listening on port number for incoming request. The same way if you are doing SSH, it's listening on 22 port. Some other process, some other port like that. Like that, web servers by default listen on port 80. Then How does that know we are sending on port 80? When you're sending from the browser, if you don't mention any port number, the browser automatically adds it 80. So web server's default port is 80. Now if the web server is not listening on 80, let's say it's listening on 88, then you should send the request to 80. How do you send it? The host name or the IP. You can use one of these two, colon, the port number. The port numbers are from 1 to 2 power 32 minus 1, 65535. Something like this, right? 65,000 approximately. All systems have these many numbers, about 65,000, 2 power 32 minus 1, 65535. You can use any port in this range. So on this server, you will have a lot of process running on a lot of ports. How do you see all the process running on ports? It's that and everything. Then if you want to see 80 is running or not, you get one. You've seen it already. The command you already know it. Right? So you have web servers that serve the static content, app servers that serve the dynamic content. Now as an administrator, you are expected to install this, stop this thing, modify the configuration, especially the port number thing, and then deploy the application. Means the developer will give you this file, you have to put this file into a corresponding location. Those are the tasks that you are learning here. Why are we here? Right. So that you are learning how to how to start and stop the servers, how to change the port number, and then how to deploy them. These are the 4 or 5 tasks that you are learning. Now earlier, once upon a time, these tasks you need to be expert at these things because these servers used to be installed directly on your Linux boxes. Then if there are any problems, you need to log in, edit those configurations and change permissions, everything. But now, because we are in cloud and we are in containers, we don't really have to be an expert at these things. All that we have to know is how do you restart the stuff and how do you change the port number. So we are not going to be experts at these things. For your case, in your case, you don't really have to be experts at these things. If you know the basics of these 3 servers, it's more than enough because we're going to put them into containers at a later point of time. Docker. Once they are inside the container, we don't do much inside a container. Nothing really changes inside a container. Right now, what we are learning is how to install on a non-container based system. Directly on a Linux system you are installing. Alright? Later we'll see the containers part. Now clear about these things? These are very basic stuff, alright? But these are fundamentals of internet kind of. How one process, browser in this case, interacts with another process, web server. This is basically how a website works. Very fundamental. And also the DNS part. DNS is nothing but just a mapping. You give it a first name, it gives back a IP address. And because systems can understand only IP addresses, they always query a DNS. Alright? Now a similar DNS exists on your system also, your laptop or server. If it's on a Unix box, you will have PTC hosts directly. This is a file here. If you do a cat on it, you will see a similar listing. IP and then host name. Same map. It's called a local DNS. It's a global DNS, means it's outside your system. So basically your system first checks this file. If it finds a map, it goes ahead with it. If it cannot find a map, it goes to the central DNS. Very basic stuff this is. If you understand very basic, it's more than enough. Any questions here? Any questions? So now go ahead and try to finish all of them today itself. They are just copy paste. Don't try to understand anything. Don't go to Google. You won't understand anything in Google related to these things. These are very basic things. Don't waste your time. You are on 12th day of training. You have done only half of what is scheduled. And you are on a vacation, which means you consumed more entertainment than you actually worked compared to other batches. Means now you have to work harder compared to others. So can we finish all the tasks today and then only leave?
Yes.
For those who are halfway. For those who finish, we move on to Docker. Alright? We'll have a Docker session also, most likely in the afternoon. Alright? And if you haven't finished by afternoon, I expect that you ask me questions. It's not okay to sit quiet, not do stuff. Both of them should not be done together. Either you keep asking questions if you are not able to finish it, or you finish it and keep going. One of these two.
So there is an issue with that context.xml file. The task is to copy that from but there is no context.xml which is with us.
Should be in Git.
No, there is in Tomcat config.
Isn't that there is a Git directory? GitHub?
No, there is not.
I don't think so.
Application is there, but context.xml file is not available, which allows.
Post me the instructions.
Yes.
Screenshot. I'll see what it is. Probably missing or something else. Alright. So you finish everything? Especially those who are lagging a little bit. You need to pick up pace. Alright? Good. Yeah, thank you.
CD space. ఆబ్జెక్ట్